My mother left my daughter a single $1 bill right after she secretly drained the girl's entire 3-year savings of $6,900 to pay for my sister's wedding flowers. She said, "Maya is young, she has plenty of time to make it back." But Agnes's wedding has to be perfect. What she didn't know was that she just wiped out the $45,000 her favorite daughter was supposed to receive. The Santa Ana winds were blowing through Newport Beach that afternoon, a dry, irritable heat that made the palm fronds hiss like nesting snakes. In Orange County, the heat doesn't make you sluggish, it makes you brittle. It's an arid, electric kind of tension that crawls under your skin and stays there. Inside our home, the air conditioning hummed with a low hum, trying to keep the 100 degrees Fahrenheit desert air at bay. I was in the kitchen, slowly working through a Blue Magic smoothie, when the silence of the house was punctuated by a sharp, hollow thud. I looked up to see Maya. My 17-year-old daughter stood in the hallway, her face a mask of pale shock that made the freckles on her nose stand out like ink splatters. In her hands, she clutched a heavy glass canister, a designer apothecary jar she'd repurposed, adorned with a single sticker, "Future Marine Biologist, Australia Fund." The jar was chillingly empty. No, not entirely empty. Sitting at the very bottom, looking microscopic against the thick glass floor, was a single $1 bill. It had been meticulously folded into the shape of a butterfly. "Mom?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper, thin and cracking like parched earth. "It's gone. All of it. I was going to clear the balance for the Great Barrier Reef program today. It was supposed to be done, Mom. All of it." I felt a sudden, sharp drop in my chest, the kind of sensation you get when you realize a load-bearing beam has just snapped. I knew that butterfly. It was a signature, a whimsical, patronizing little habit my mother, Vanessa, had used since I was a child. She called them butterfly kisses, usually given to us when she was feeling particularly generous with her pocket change. To see it here, at the bottom of my daughter's stolen future, was a declaration of war. To understand why my heart felt like it was being ground into the porcelain floor, you have to understand Maya's grind. In a town where most kids her age spent their summers lounging on private docks or posting curated, candid shots from the Waldorf Astoria, Maya had chosen the dirt. For 3 years, she had built a pet-sitting and dog-walking empire in the steep, winding hills of Newport Coast and Laguna Beach. I had watched her come home every evening, her sneakers ruined by trail dust, her shirt salt-crusted from the sweat of walking 3 golden doodles at a time in the relentless California sun. She had worked through the holidays, waking up at 5 a.m. on Christmas Day to feed horses in the canyons, while my sister, Agnes, and my mother lounged in silk pajamas, sipping mimosas and complaining about the lack of service at the local country club. I could have easily funded Maya's internship. As an architect specializing in high-end coastal residential, my bank account was more than healthy. But after my divorce 10 years ago, after my ex-husband had systematically stripped away my confidence and my assets, I wanted Maya to know the weight of her own agency. I wanted her to know that her dreams were built on a foundation of her own making, one that no man or circumstance could ever pull out from under her. And now, my mother had treated that foundation like a slush fund. Maya used to greet her grandmother's visits with such fervor, pouring out her dreams and plans with a trusting heart. Vanessa would offer her smiles and polished praise, occasionally playing the doting benefactor by tucking a $5 bill into the glass jar. It was a cold, calculated betrayal. The very person who had helped build that small reservoir of hope was the one who eventually reached in to drain it dry. The rage that sparked in me wasn't the hot, messy kind. It was cold. I remembered Vanessa's comments from dinner last week. She had been lamenting the rising costs of Agnes's boho chic wedding at Pelican Hill. "The white orchids are double the price this season, Cassandra." She had sighed, adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet. "Agnes is just devastated. She needs that floral arch for the ceremony photos. Her Instagram followers expect a certain aesthetic, you know? Family really should step up when things are this critical." I had ignored her then, thinking it was just more of her usual narcissistic chatter. "Get in the car, Maya," I said. My voice was low, vibrating with a frequency I hadn't used in a decade. "Mom, what are we doing?" "We're going to Newport Coast," I said, grabbing my keys. "And we're going to find out exactly how much those flowers were worth to your grandmother." As we walked out into the shimmering, oppressive heat of the Santa Ana winds, I felt a total shift in my internal architecture. For years, I had been the reliable one. I had been the daughter who designed Vanessa's home renovations for free, the one who covered the gaps in her lifestyle expenses, the one who stayed silent to keep the peace. But as I looked at the empty jar Maya was still holding, the submissiveness I'd carried since the divorce evaporated. What she didn't know was that she had just committed a $45,000 mistake. That was the amount I had quietly earmarked as a wedding gift for Agnes, a gesture to settle her catering bills and give her a fresh start. I started the engine. The high-performance hum of the SUV felt like a growl. The origami butterfly sat at the bottom of a glass jar behind the passenger seat, where I had carefully placed it inside a small cardboard box at once, a cruel taunt and a quiet heartbreak. The drive to Newport Coast was a study in rising temperatures and falling patience. The SUV's tires hummed against the pristine asphalt of Pacific Coast Highway, the ocean to our right, a mocking, glittering blue. Beside me, Maya was a statue of quiet grief, her hands folded in her lap as if she were afraid to touch anything and find it empty. In the world of architecture, we call it structural fatigue, the point where a material has been stressed so many times, it simply forgets how to hold itself up. Vanessa's house sat behind a gate within a gate, a Mediterranean-style monolith overlooking the Pacific. As we stepped out, the Santa Ana winds whipped a stray strand of hair across my face like a lash. But the moment the heavy mahogany doors swung open, we were enveloped in the Newport chill, a hospital-grade HVAC system that smelled faintly of expensive eucalyptus diffusers and a complete lack of soul. "Cassie!" And Maya, "Look at you, you're glowing, though perhaps a bit wind-blown," Vanessa greeted us, gliding across the white marble foyer. She looked curated, her skin pulled tight by the best surgeons in the county, her linen lounge set the exact color of an unblemished pearl. She reached out to touch Maya's cheek, but my daughter flinched, retreating into the shadow of my shoulder. "We're not staying for the pleasantries, Mom," I said, my voice hitting the marble like a dropped chisel. I held up the glass canister. The sun hitting the foyer made the single-folded butterfly at the bottom glow with a sickeningly bright light. "Where is Maya's money?" Vanessa's smile didn't break. It merely pivoted into that disappointed matriarch expression she had perfected over decades. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, a masterpiece of Calacatta marble and hidden appliances. "Honestly, Cassandra, you've always had such a transactional view of relationships," she said, her back to us as she poured 3 glasses of alkaline water. "Family isn't a balance sheet, it's a support system. And right now, your sister is in a crisis." Agnes wandered in from the terrace, her phone practically fused to her palm. She was wearing an oversized bride sweatshirt and biker shorts, her hair in a messy bun that probably took 40 minutes to achieve. "Mom, did the florist call back?" Agnes asked, ignoring us entirely. "If I don't get the white orchids for the Pelican Hill reception, the whole coastal boho aesthetic is dead. My photographer said the lighting at the resort requires editorial-grade florals, or the shots will look flat, and Thatcher is being so weird about the budget. He says he won't pay for perishable decor." I looked at my sister, a woman who measured her worth in engagement metrics and the approval of a man who treated her like a line-item expense. Then I looked back at Vanessa, who was handing a glass of water to Agnes with a look of pure, enabling devotion. "I simply reallocated some funds for the family's immediate needs, Cassandra," Vanessa said, her voice devoid of even a hint of shame. "And before you start a scene, remember that Maya is 17. She has her whole life to save for a trip. But Agnes, this is her moment. She's building a brand, a life. She can't walk down the aisle looking mid-tier." "Mid-tier?" I whispered. The word felt like a slap. Maya worked 5 a.m. shifts on Christmas. She walked dogs until her feet bled in the Laguna Hills while you two were getting oxygen facials. That wasn't family money, Mom. That was her life's blood. "She can work more shifts," Agnes chimed in, scrolling through a digital lookbook. It's just dog walking, Cassie. It's not like she's performing surgery. Besides, she can go to Australia after she finishes college. What's the rush? The invisibility Maya had endured for years finally became a physical weight in the room. I saw my daughter shrink, her eyes fixed on the floor, her spirit being dismantled by the very people who were supposed to protect it. I felt the final structural tie to my mother snap. It wasn't a loud break. It was the silent, terrifying moment a dam gives way. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, rhythmic calm. "Image is everything in Newport, isn't it? And family should support each other." I pulled my phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over my banking app. I had been setting aside the profits from my high-end residential projects. A $45,000 gift for Agnes's wedding was a gesture to settle her catering bills and prove that, despite our differences, I was the good sister. Or perhaps, it was simply the ingrained habit of knowing that, sooner or later, I would inevitably be the one covering a portion of my mother's credit card debt anyway. I opened the app and turned the screen toward them. The balance glowed in the dim, expensive light of the kitchen. $45,000. Vanessa's eyes went wide. A soft, hungry gasp escaped her lips. "Cassie, oh, thank God, this settles everything. We can call the caterer at the Ritz, and the floral arch we can double the size." Agnes dropped her phone on the counter, her eyes lighting up with a predatory, sudden affection. "Oh, Cassie, I can finally get the custom silk draping for the ballroom." I looked at Maya. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She wasn't looking at the money, she was looking at me, waiting to see if I would fold again. If I would prioritize the family peace over the girl who had actually earned her keep. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice cold as a Pacific riptide. "Family does come first." With 3 steady taps, I initiated a transfer. I didn't send it to the Ritz. I didn't send it to the orchid importer. I transferred the full cost of the Australian internship, plus an extra $5,000 for travel and gear, directly into Maya's college savings account. Transfer successful. "What are you doing?" Agnes asked, her voice rising to a shrill, frantic pitch as she watched my face. "I'm reallocating the budget," I said, tucking the phone back into my pocket. "Maya's future just got fully funded, and as for your wedding gift, Agnes, that $45,000 wasn't just a gift, it was the deposit for the ballroom at Pelican Hill. Without it, your coastal boho dream is just a Pinterest board." Vanessa stood frozen, the glass of alkaline water trembling in her hand. As the silence in the room became a vacuum, the sound of an entire high society future collapsing under the weight of a single, honest debt. A vacuum created by the sudden withdrawal of $45,000 from the family's expectations. In an architect's world, when a cantilevered structure loses its support, there is a terrifying moment of stillness before the entire thing yields to gravity. I watched the realization sink into my mother's face, not a realization of guilt, but the cold, hard math of a tactical error. Vanessa's hand trembled slightly as she set her glass of alkaline water on the marble. The Newport chill in the air seemed to sharpen. "Cassandra," she began, her voice dropping into that melodic, manipulative register she used when she wanted to negotiate a change order. She stepped toward me, her heels clicking like a countdown. "You've made your point, you've protected Maya, but let's be rational. That $45,000. You said it was for the wedding. You can't just take it back because of a temporary disagreement over a few $1,000s. "It wasn't a disagreement, Mom. It was a theft," I said. I looked at Agnes, who was staring at the floor, her mind clearly frantically scrolling through her mental budget. "Cassie, come on." Agnes snapped, her boho chic facade finally cracking to reveal the entitled child underneath. "You know Thatcher isn't paying for the catering at Pelican Hill. He thinks a buffet at a country club is fine. If you don't put down that deposit, I lose the date. I lose the ballroom. My entire branding for the next 6 months is tied to this wedding. Do you have any idea what this does to my engagement?" I looked at my sister, a woman who measured her life in pixels and likes, and felt a profound sense of exhaustion. "I know exactly what it does, Agnes. I had an appointment with Beatrice at Saffron and Silk for 4 o'clock this afternoon. I was going to hand her the check. A gift. to ensure you had your A-list moment. Agnes's eyes lit up with a desperate, predatory hope. So you're still going? We can just go now. I'll even apologize to Maya. Maya, I'm sorry, okay? There. Now Cassie, we have to hurry or we'll lose the slot. The lack of sincerity in her voice was a structural flaw I could no longer ignore. I'm not going to the appointment, Agnes, I said. I pulled out my phone and hit the speed dial for the catering director. I pressed the speakerphone icon and set the device on the marble island. The ringtone echoed through the silent, sterile kitchen. Saffron and Silk, Beatrice speaking. A crisp, professional voice chirped. Hello, Cassandra. We're all set for the 4 o'clock. Are you on your way? Agnes leaned forward, her breath hitching. Vanessa was frozen, her face a mask of dawning horror. Beatrice, it's Cassandra Vance, I said, my voice as steady as a plumb line. I'm calling to cancel the appointment. I will not be providing the $45,000 deposit for my sister's wedding. The silence on the other end of the line was mirrored in the room. I'm sorry? Beatrice asked, her professional veneer slipping. Cancel? Cassandra, if we don't have the deposit by 5, the Pelican Hill date opens up to the waitlist. There are 3 other brides vying for that weekend. Let them have it, I said, locking eyes with my mother. The funding for this project has been pulled, due to a catastrophic failure in leadership. Thank you, Beatrice. I ended the call. For 3 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Then, the collapse began. Agnes screamed a jagged, ugly sound that tore through the curated peace of the Newport house. You've always been small-minded, Cassie. You're ruining a legacy for a dog walker's pocket change. I'll be the laughingstock of the OC. Everyone knows I booked Pelican Hill. Vanessa turned pale, the blood retreating from her Botox-tightened skin until she looked like a ghost of herself. She realized, too late, that she had traded a $45,000 fortress for a $6,000 heist. Cassie, wait, Vanessa stammered, her voice shaking. She started backpedaling, her sweet mask finally shattered. I'll pay Maya. I'll find the money. I'll sell the Cartier watch your father gave me. Just call Beatrice back. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. We can't lose the ballroom. Too late, Mom, I said. The loathing I felt was pure, a cold jet of ice in my veins. The foundation is gone. You can't build a high society wedding on a theft. Maya, let's go. I turned and walked out, not looking back at the sobbing bride, or the ghost-white matriarch. The dry Santa Ana wind hit me like a physical wall. I climbed into the SUV and pulled my phone back out. I opened the security app to review the morning's footage, and there she was, my mother, arriving at 10 a.m. I'd been buried in blueprints in my home office at the time, buzzing her in remotely with the weary assumption that she'd only come to nag about the wedding preparations. By the time I finished and headed downstairs, she had already vanished. The phone vibrated against my palm. A message from Vanessa. You're misunderstanding. I was only borrowing from Maya for the flower deposit. I was going to pay it back soon. There it was. That was all I needed. I had the evidence, and I had the lawyers. I drafted a swift email before shifting the car into gear. To Cole Morgan. Cole, I need the sharpest, coldest version of you. My mother stole nearly $7K from my daughter's room. I have the footage and the confession. I want it back with interest. Handle it. I glanced at Maya. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, the shadow of submissiveness in her eyes had been replaced by a sharp, clear recognition. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was an apprentice in the art of the no. As we drove down the coast, the sun was a blinding orange coin sinking into the Pacific, a final payment on a debt Vanessa didn't even realize she owed. The notifications on my phone were like a series of microquakes, each vibration a tiny fracture attempting to spread through the new foundation I was pouring. In the sterile, air-conditioned quiet of my home office, the sound was deafening. I didn't have to look at the screen to know the source. In Orange County, social suicide is considered a fate worse than death, and my mother was currently frantically trying to resuscitate her reputation. Vanessa's texts were a masterclass in high-end gaslighting. Cassandra, you've clearly had a heat-induced breakdown. I was literally in the middle of drafting a repayment schedule for Maya when you stormed out like a child. How could you humiliate your sister in front of Saffron and Silk? You're destroying this family's standing over a temporary cash flow issue. Then came the shift to the martyr of Newport tone. I suppose I'll just have to liquidate my vintage Chanel collection to fix the mess you've made. I hope you're happy knowing your mother is selling her legacy because you decided to be vindictive." I didn't reply. In my line of work, you don't argue with a collapsing wall, you clear the area and call in the demolition crew. I took screenshots of every message, the veiled threats, the blatant lies about promissory notes, the frantic bargaining, and forwarded them in a single clean file to Cole Morgan. Then, I did what I should have done the day I signed my divorce papers. I blocked them, both of them. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was the weight of a vault door finally locking into place. By evening, the theater had moved to a larger stage. Agnes, a woman who treated her Instagram feed like a holy scripture, had launched her counter-offensive. She posted a photo of herself, sitting on the beach in Laguna, looking wistfully at the sunset through a grainy, black and white filter. The caption was a masterpiece of vague booking. "It's heartbreaking when the people you've looked up to your whole life choose a bank balance over blood. Some people would rather see a sister's dreams turn to ash than show a shred of grace. Praying for those who have lost their way in the pursuit of justice. Family first. Heartbroken. Betrayal." The irony was thick enough to choke on. Within 2 hours, the concerned pings started coming in from our extended circle, the women at the yacht club, the developers I worked with, the cousins in San Diego. But the tide didn't turn the way Agnes expected. Most of our circle had spent years enduring her performative main character energy and my mother's subtle cutting elitism. They knew Agnes's boho chic lifestyle was a flimsy facade built on credit and my quiet labor. The lack of public support for her post felt less like a snub and more like an audience settling in to watch a long overdue demolition. The hardest part wasn't the digital noise, it was the silence in the kitchen. I watched Maya sitting at the island, her laptop open to the Great Barrier Reef internship portal, but her eyes were fixed on the empty glass jar. "She used to call me her little pearl," Maya said softly, her voice devoid of its usual spark. "Every time I dived into the pool, or brought home a science trophy, she'd tell me I was the family's sole appreciating asset. I thought she was admiring my growth, but she was just appraising me for future collateral." The pain in her voice was a structural flaw I couldn't simply patch with a wire transfer, but as the night wore on, I saw the shift. Maya watched me coordinate with Cole, her eyes tracking the steady, unemotional way I handled the fallout. "We aren't victims, Maya," I told her, sitting down across from her and closing her laptop. "We are the architects of our own boundaries. If the people inside the house are trying to burn it down, you don't stay and try to save the furniture. You walk out and let the insurance handle the rest." She looked at her phone. Agnes was now posting budget-friendly mood boards to garner sympathy likes, and then she looked at me. She sat up a little straighter, the slumped shoulders of the girl who had been robbed, replaced by the sharp, defensive lines of a woman learning how to hold her ground. The Santa Ana winds were still howling through the canyons of Orange County on Friday, the kind of devil winds that make the brush brittle and the people even more so. In this heat, the sky is a flat, bruised blue, and the air smells faintly of sage and distant wildfires. I sat in my home office, watching the dust motes dance in a sliver of sunlight. When Maya walked in, she looked like a different person than the girl who had collapsed in the hallway. Her face was flushed, her hair pulled back in a utilitarian knot, and her skin was dusted with the fine silt of the Laguna hiking trails. But her eyes were cold as the Pacific at dawn. "She was waiting for me at the trailhead," Maya said, dropping her hydration pack on the floor. She was leaning against her Lexus, looking like she'd stepped out of a Street John catalog, silk scarf, oversized sunglasses, not a hair out of place despite the wind. "My mother, Vanessa, never did anything without an audience, even if that audience was just her own ego. She tried to hug me," Maya continued, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. She smelled like Joe Malone in desperation. She started crying, the kind of quiet, elegant weeping she does at charity galas. "She told me I was her little pearl, and that I had to talk to you. She said I was the only one who could reason with your sudden cruelty before the lawyers destroyed our family's legacy." "And?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maya reached into the pocket of her leggings. She pulled out the $1 bill Vanessa had left in the jar, the one folded into a butterfly. It was wilted now, the edges frayed from being carried in a pocket through a heat wave. I gave it back to her, Maya said. A small, hard smile touched her lips, a mirror of my own. I told her, "Grandma, you're right. I'm 17, I'm young, I have all the time in the world to make another $6,900. But you're 73, Vanessa. You're old, and you don't have enough time left to earn back a granddaughter who actually loved you." The silence that followed was the sound of a final curtain falling. I looked at my daughter and saw a woman who had just finished building her own fortress. She didn't say anything after that. Maya finished. She just stood there in the dust. I think she realized her white silk scarf was starting to turn cream. "Go get some water, baby," I said, my voice thick. "I have a guest coming over. I need you to stay at Sarah's house for a few hours. I don't want you here for the demolition." The guest arrived at 5 p.m. Vanessa entered my house with a sigh of fake grace, clutching a small boutique bag from the La Durée. "Cassie, dear," she said, her voice a practiced lilt as she walked into the kitchen. "I brought those organic lavender macarons you used to love. I know we've all been stressed. But we're family. We shouldn't let men like Cole Morgan tell us how to treat one another. It's so gauche." She set the macarons on the marble island. The smell, sweet, floral, and entirely artificial, was a ghost of a childhood she had used as a leash for 40 years. I didn't touch the bag. I didn't offer her an iced tea. I didn't even sit down. "Sit down, Mom," I said. She blinked, her sweet mask flickering for a second. She sat, smoothing her linen trousers with trembling fingers. "I know Agnes was out of line on Instagram, and I've told her to delete the posts. We just need to call off the lawyers." "It's embarrassing, Cassie. People at the yacht club are starting to ask questions." "People should ask questions," I said. I slid my iPad Pro across the countertop. On the screen was a thumbnail of a video file. I tapped play. The footage was high definition. It showed my living room. Vanessa was seen entering through the door. The camera caught her walking straight to Maya's room. Vanessa's face went ghostly white, the Botox-tightened skin around her mouth twitching. The Grand Dame of Newport vanished, replaced by a woman staring at the high-res evidence of her own felony. "I have the footage," I said, my voice flat and rhythmic, like a hammer hitting a nail. "And I have the messages where you admitted to taking the loan, only if I funded the Pelican Hill deposit." "In legal terms, Mom, that's not a misunderstanding. That's grand larceny, breaking and entering, and extortion." You wouldn't do this," she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "To your own mother? Over a few $1,000s? Think of the scandal, Cassandra. Think of what it would do to your firm's reputation with the city council." "I am thinking of my reputation," I replied. "My reputation is built on integrity, and our relationship is a structure with a condemned foundation. You have two choices. 1. You pay Maya back the full $6,900, plus 15% interest, for the emotional distress you caused, plus every cent of Cole Morgan's legal fees. Right now, wire transfer." I leaned in, the cool air of the kitchen feeling like ice against my skin. Choice 2. I hand this footage, and the text logs to the district attorney. "I hear the Orange County Jail in Santa Ana is particularly lovely in a heat wave when the cooling systems fail. And I imagine your friends at the Philharmonic Society will be fascinated to learn why you're suddenly absent from the gala season." Cole's intel was undeniably effective. His visceral description of the prison conditions was enough to instill a primal sort of dread. Still, we had agreed to draw the line there. Whatever her sins, she was still Maya's grandmother, a woman whose years were already weighing heavy on her. Maya's faith in her had withered to nothing, yet the girl had no stomach for true cruelty. She didn't want to see her grandmother broken by the weight of the law. Vanessa looked at the iPad, then back at me. She looked for the good daughter she had spent decades training. She didn't find her. "You've changed," she whispered, a sneer finally breaking through her vanity. "You're cold. You're just like your father was before he left for Seattle." "No, Mom," I said, checking my watch. "I'm an architect. I've just finally learned how to read the blueprints of a toxic site. You have 10 minutes to make the transfer. After that, I call the police." I walked to the window and watched the palm trees whip in the wind. Behind me, I heard the frantic, shaking taps of a woman who had finally realized that her favorite daughter's social media metrics weren't worth the price of her own freedom. The soft chime of a banking notification. Vanessa left without a word, her shattered, trembling silhouette, a far cry from the woman who had lived in my mind for so long. The lavender macarons sat untouched on the marble, a sweet, crumbling bribe that had arrived far too late to save a house that had already been leveled to the ground. The Tom Bradley International Terminal at LAX is a temple of glass and steel, a place where the frantic energy of Southern California finally hits a hard boundary. Standing near the security entrance, I watched Maya. She didn't look like the girl who had collapsed in my kitchen a month ago. She looked like someone who had survived a structural failure and walked out with the blueprints for a much larger life. She adjusted the straps of her heavy-duty backpack, the kind meant for the rugged coastal work of the Great Barrier Reef. She had received every cent of the $6,900, plus the 15% interest my mother had practically bled onto the keyboard to transfer. "I'm ready, Mom," Maya said. Her eyes were steady, the sadness of the betrayal now just a weathered patina on her character, rather than a fresh, bleeding wound. She hugged me tight, a firm, grounding embrace that felt like reinforced steel. "Go save the oceans. I'll be right here, building the base camp for whenever you come back." I watched her walk through the metal detector, her silhouette disappearing into the stream of travelers heading toward the Pacific. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the phantom weight of my mother's expectations or my sister's manufactured crises. I had shed my lifelong submissiveness, like a skin that no longer fit. I was no longer the woman who built luxury facades for others. I had finally built a fortress for myself. I walked out of the terminal and drove south, back toward Newport. I didn't go home. I went to my new office, a space I had designed with high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked straight out at the ocean. I pulled over at a small cafe in Crystal Cove and ordered an espresso, the bitter steam a sharp contrast to the salty sea air. I pulled out my phone not to check for the calls, but to see the public wreckage of the boho chic wedding. Agnes's Instagram was a ghost town. She had archived every single post related to Pelican Hill. A mutual acquaintance had posted a grainy photo of the ceremony from the day before. There were no white orchid arches, no custom silk draping, no high-end catering from Saffron and Silk. Instead, the wedding had been a rushed, shabby chic affair in a generic community hall in the valley, decorated with grocery store carnations and a palpable sense of defeat. Thatcher Barnes, the notoriously frugal fiancé, looked like he was checking his watch in every photo. Agnes looked like she was holding back a scream behind a veil that was clearly off the rack. The high society style had been stripped away, leaving only the naked truth of two people who valued optics over substance. Rumor had it that the Barnes family had pulled the plug on the remaining budget the moment they realized my mother's wealth was just a house of cards held together by my quiet labor. I took a sip of my coffee and felt a strange, quiet peace. I didn't feel joy at their misfortune. I felt the clinical satisfaction of a job done right. When you ignore the rot in the floorboards for decades, you shouldn't be surprised when the piano falls through to the basement. Vanessa lived only 10 minutes away, yet we were worlds apart. I had instructed Cole Morgan to finalize the no-contact agreement. She had tried to send one last peace offering, a gift box of those organic lavender macarons, with a note claiming she'd only done it for the good of the family. I had dropped the box, unopened, into the trash bin at the firm. Love doesn't steal from the next generation to pay for the vanity of the current one. I entered my office, the sunlight hitting my drafting table in clean, straight lines. I wasn't working on a project for a Newport socialite. I was sketching the preliminary designs for a pro bono marine education center I wanted to help fund in Laguna. The cruel dollar bill was gone, likely spent or lost in the chaos of my mother's financial ruin. But the lesson it taught me that some things are too expensive to be bought with silence was etched into the very foundation of my new life. I picked up my pencil, the lead hitting the paper with a precise, satisfying click. I was finally building something that would stand the test of time.